and I am give you the power. Hold on. Oops. Make the host. All right. You should be in charge now. Yay, I can see it.
Okay. All right, we'll wait a couple minutes here.
Perfect. We usually always have some stragglers.
So is that a protein shake then? If you just came from the gym?
This is coffee.
Oh, coffee. Yeah. That's supposed to be before the gym so you can get through it.
If I drank it before, I'd throw up. There is collagen powder, peptide, protein, whatever in it though.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I started taking that stuff a while ago, some collagen, and my chiropractor told me that it wasn't worth it, but I've saw a difference. I don't know. It's extra protein. It's, it's tasteless. You just add it to whatever, it's better than a protein shake that you basically chew down.
I see a difference. I mean, I'm old, so I feel like it's helpful in my joints, and I feel like I see a difference in my skin and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably saw the most difference just hopping on zinc with my skin. But anyway, if you're in Arizona, you got to do what you got to do to protect yourself, right?
Right. Someday we'll all need knee replacements. My knees still pop. Every time I go up the stairs, it sounds like Rice Krispie treats.
Oh, no.
This is some maracas.
Exactly.
It hasn't been so, that's the thing is humping that ladder up and downstairs on 2 stories and commercial stuff. And my knees used to be like maracas, but it hasn't been so bad lately just because, I've been going to the gym as well too, and doing a lot of core stuff. And that's helped a lot. My back doesn't hurt as much. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. It makes a big difference going to the gym and strengthening your core. It's amazing how much your core has to do with everything else.
Oh, I know. Can somebody help me off this bench? I can't sit up. Come on, old man.
Oh. Do you want to go ahead and start, or do you want to keep waiting?
Oh, let's give it a couple minutes and then we'll start here. And then I know Dan and I've got an inspection after this, so
okay.
We'll try to keep it tight here.
But
don't brag or anything.
What's that?
Don't brag or anything, Brian.
If you want, come up and do it for me, because I've already gotten warned by the guy's going to stay there while I do the inspection.
Oh, nice.
He's the builder of the home, and
no.
He's used high end building practices they use over in the UK, and he's incorporated in the construction of this house here in Arizona. And I'm thinking, my mom and dad are from the UK. They don't do anything over there. As long as it's standing when they're finished, that's great.
Right.
And I've been to those old houses over there. It's ridiculous. So it's going to be interesting to see.
I'll say a prayer for you. That does not sound like a fun couple of hours.
Yeah. Fun is right.
But you'll know how great his house is. He's going to tell you all about it by the time you're done.
See, that's the problem, Lisa, is, you end up spending, you go and you introduce yourself. You don't want to be rude or anything, but then he starts talking. You're like, TikTok, Clarice, I got to go,
We experience that too as realtors. Sometimes the sellers think their house is so great, they want to be there for the showing, and then they just start telling you all about their house, which you don't care. You just want to see the house. Like,
just got to see the house. Yep.
Yeah.
What you think is great maybe isn't great for my client. So can we just look at the house and we'll let you know if we have questions?
Right, exactly. You know, I understand the pride of ownership and I respect that. I really do. But, you know, there's something, and we painted this room a ruby red, just come, oh, God. All right. Well, I think we'll start here, and we can get ready to catch up when we started here. And then I want to start off by introducing Dan to everybody. Dan Pierce is one of my inspectors in the East Valley. Dan is also a certified INTERNAHI inspector. I'm an ASHI certified inspector as well. So we actually have little extra credentials. It's just initials behind our name. That's all. Mm-hmm. But Dan is also our sewer lateral technician. Basically, Dan has worked his tail off, got his certification, and probably knows more than most of the plumbers that are out there that have been doing it for a long time. Dan is very, very knowledgeable when it comes to stuff, and one of the easiest going, nicest gentlemen I've ever had the pleasure to work with. Dan has actually helped me when I got sick a couple of years ago. Dan filled in for me and helped me get through some tough times. And Dan, a lot of my clients said Dan was a great guy. So if you guys need inspections, I'm here for you, and Dan's here for you as well too. So with that being said, we'll kind of start going through.
Real quick, they are both amazing because I've used them both. And again, I met Dan when Brian got sick, and he started helping me with my inspections, and they're both amazing. So if you guys do need help, they do great work, and they're super communicative and easy to work with.
Yeah, we're from the school of education. Not this, and it kind of falls into this what we're doing today. It's educating our realtors, but it's also educating our clients too. And you can see where we have that 12 months of extended advice. That's just a timeline. I mean, I've got people that have called me 3-4 years after I've done the inspection. And it's funny because they'll call and say, hey, do you remember that house in Sun City you did? I'm like, no, but give me the address and we'll pull up the report, because I can pull up reports from years past. But like I said, we're always there. And the last thing, I know Dan does this too. And so one of the last things we say to a client when we hand them our card is, hey, listen, we're always going to be here. We'll always be here to answer your question. And I think now that the first time home buyers are starting to come back in, Lisa, do you see it maybe a little bit more? I'm excited about it. I really am. They're going to need a little bit more talking to and helping and where to go and how things get put together. And I really do. I really enjoy talking to the younger couples, and they're like sponges. So that's exciting to us. So,
yeah.
But here's some of the things that we offer, pretty much on a daily basis. We're here 7 days a week. There's always an inspector that's going to be available. I know Danny and I work on Saturday and Sunday as well too. Sometimes it's just easier, so we're here. This is kind of a little preface of what we're going to be doing today. We don't ever take our opinion as gold, but we're here as professionals as well. Use your managing brokers, use your smart people in your group there. Always go to your broker if there's ever issues or concerns or anything like that. We know that things go catty-wonky real quick, and have been. I've been a part of them as well too. But Dan and I were just talking about this last night. There's some houses out there that are rough, and that's our job. Is we're not there to kick a house together and just rip a house apart. It's not our job. The house speaks for itself. We've always said that statement. The house speaks for itself. And we're there to tell you what's going on and make sure you understand what we're seeing, the things that it can be associated with, and safety concerns if there is. So what we're going to try to do today is number one for you to be able to say to your client, this is the one we need a little extra contractor work. Be able to identify issues that come up before the inspection even comes up as well too. You'll be able to, after this presentation, I think you guys, a lot of you will be able to see what needs to be fixed. What are some of the signs? What are things, identifiers that will help you help yourselves and help your buyers think that, you know, here's some things that I want to make sure Brian or Dan checks when they come in to do the inspection, but here's my concerns, you know. And that's one of my things that I've always said too. When I start talking to a client before we start walking around a house after I've done the inspection, is I'll ask him is, what are your concerns? What did you see when you were walking around with Lisa or Mara or, you know, any other realtor? What was kind of making your head scratch? But be able to sort through the houses as well too. What defects come standard with some houses, meaning what's pretty common, you know, age of the home stuff, that's very common as well. And be able to see the house away kind of through our eyes and what we see as well too. So today we're going to try to go through all of these elements, roof, windows, electrical, water heater, foundations, furnace, siding. We're not mold inspectors, but we do have good noses. It's funny, after I got sick and I started coming back to work, I had gotten really, really crazy because my sense of smell came back. I can smell it now, and it affects me now as well too. But not that we're mold inspectors, but you know, we have the tools to identify and then recommend. Some older houses that we still have to identify, asbestos, possible lead-based paint issues as well too. My biggest goal, I want you to make sure that you are the smartest realtor ever, because we know that return business is a big part of what you guys do every day. And we understand there's realtors out there that they're just number crunchers. And I think with the way the market's going as well, we're seeing it's such a pleasure, honestly, to see realtors that know what they're talking about help us help the client as well too. You know, with the way things are going, you know, this class I think could help you as well too, kind of pick and choose some stuff, kind of point clients away from issues that, you know, could come up. And that's what we're all about. All houses are going to have something, you know, as far as a report, there's always something. Older houses will have some older checklists that we'll go through as well too. But, you know, there's things that we just need to check, and we need to make sure that you understand the deficiency as well. But be prepared. The report that we're sending you is just not something that we take lightly. You know, we work hard. Dan can attest how many hours a night we sit, you know, and commiserate about how we're going to write a report, or how, you know, because I'm the chief inspector. You know, a lot of times I'll get phone calls, or I'll get a picture from my inspector and go, I know this is really bad. I know how to write this up, but I want to make sure that you know, we really do take the time to make sure that we're letting the client know the severity of the deficiency and what we need to do about it. Remember, in a home inspection, there's three elements of the deficiency that we have to make sure. We have to identify it, we have to report on it, and we have to make a recommendation. Those three elements have to be in every narrative that we write. So there is a lot that goes into our home inspection narratives and our report writing. Some of the things that hopefully will kind of show you how as well too is how to tell if a roof needs to be replaced from the driveway. And there's some cool stuff that we can talk about there. What are the two places to check in a house to find out what kind of plumbing we have? This is a big question, especially down in Tempe and older houses. Ahwatukee, I've had agents go, I think this is I'm looking at the report from the seller, and they think they have polybutylene, but I'm not sure. We're going to teach you how to check and where you can look. What are the two recalled electrical panels? And actually, this is another conversation that Dan and I just had. There's a third one now too. A new electrical service panel that just came up from Square D. It's the QO breaker panel. That is something that's actually a new construction. But again, I told Dan, and I haven't seen any up here. All of our service electrical panels from Square D are actually mostly manufactured in Mexico. So I haven't seen any QO, what we call QO breakers, but it is something we can discuss a little bit more. And how to spot normal settling as opposed to major structural issues. What is a crack? What is a good crack? What is just a crack? What is a crack that goes, oh my gosh, we gotta look at that. So I'm gonna let Dan start into the roofing section because Dan loves climbing all over roofs, and I'm gonna let Dan kind of go through here.
Well, roofs are great. Roofs are the first place that I like to hop up on. It's the first place that water is going to intrude the building. It's the first place that deteriorates because it's closest to the sun. It gets hit by the rain first. So that's the first place I want to check for damage or holes, because everything that comes through the roof is going to go through the house. So I hop up on the roof, and these asphalt shingle roofs, like you see in the picture, they can come in different colors. It's just basically an asphalt membrane with granulars applied to the top surface of it. And different factors will cause those granulars to fade or fall off the surface over time. UV light is one of the big things. In ventilation problems is probably one of the biggest common things that I see that I can spot from the ground. You can look up at a house, say it was built in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Their ventilation practices back there weren't as good as they are now. So we had some ventilation issues. Like if we go to the next slide, we can see that there's some mold, there's some moss built up on the roof surface.
Just so you guys know, we aren't seeing the slides change. We just see the very first slide.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm not sure what slide you guys are on, but we only see the very first one. It hasn't changed.
Maybe we can change that to the roof one, Brian.
I don't know why it's not just changing on mine. I understand that.
Oh, that is weird.
It says I'm screen sharing.
Yeah, I can see the screen, and all I can see is the first slide though. I see all the slides to the left. It's almost like you didn't start the slideshow.
Or it's almost like using your monitor as the monitor for the presentation.
Okay. Let's see here. Oh, come on. Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
Anyway, we don't need to see a picture of the roof to talk about ventilation. Ventilation issues are very common. I've seen them in the 60s, 70s, 80s style roofs in the houses. They usually don't have soffit ventilation underneath the eaves. They usually typically just have a gable vent on each side of the roof to let a little bit of air in, a little bit of air out. When the roof gets updated, when they reapply a new surface, they should install new vents. So when a new roof gets applied, 5-10 years ago, it should have had new vents installed. Either you're looking at the turbines on top of the house, or you're looking at a ridge vent along the top ridge of it. There we go. Okay, on that picture, we're looking at mold, mildew. We're looking at a bunch of bacterial growth or up on the roof surface. You can see on the right side, there's a masthead. You can see the framing member that extends down to the rain gutters. You can see that's kind of got a big bump there. That's telling me that the sheathing has dropped down. The weight of this roof is actually dropped down over the roof structure. So it's easy to spot things like this from the ground. Usually the sun is going to hit it from a certain angle, and you can see the divots in the roof. It's typically meaning it's got some issues. You're probably going to need it fixed. The waves in the roof can be caused by several different factors. You're looking at old fire damage, old water damage, again, ventilation issues. A lot of these can be spotted from the roof, and it might have great asphalt shingles, but the structure below it might be in need of some repairs. You can see in older buildings when the roof is really caved in. Some older roof structures were not built as well. They used better materials. The wood that they use is actually a lot better, but the building practices that they used were not sound like they are today.
Are you seeing these pictures all right, Dan? Is everybody seeing the pictures?
I'm just seeing the one with the red house. And then I've got your slides on the left side.
All right. Are you seeing the ones inside?
That's what I see too.
What are you seeing right now?
You're on slide number
just 9. Just a red brick house with a white garage door.
Yeah.
This slide says, let's get started with some section.
Did you hit slideshow at the top bar? You click on that and then start.
Yeah.
There, now we're in the slideshow. So you might have to go backwards or forwards to whatever slide you're supposed to be on.
Actually, that's where we're at right there. So we're good.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, those are burnout trusses.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You got your burnt out rafters, your burnt out roof structure that's going to decrease the strength of that roof. And then on the right side, you're looking at extra layers of asphalt shingles. Sometimes they just don't take the shingles off, and 2 layers is all we want to see at the most. 3 layers is too much. It's too much weight. I've actually seen a couple instances where they would take concrete tile and put it right over the top of the asphalt shingle. You might think that's a good practice, and you might have a good underlayment that's going to last a long time, but that roof was not manufactured for the weight of that extra tile roof. So there's just some issues that you can see. A lot of people try and take some shortcuts that are pretty easily noticeable. But if we're moving on to the next slide, you can actually see more of the 2 layers of asphalt shingle tiles. You can see kind of the gray on top, and then there's more of a brownish style asphalt on top. So that's 2 layers. You've got your valley off to the left. It looks pretty clean, looks like a pretty good install, but it is extra weight. It is extra weight on the roof, weighing it down. And then on the next slide itself, you're looking at more layers, and your asphalt shingle roof that's exposed to the sun in higher UV light areas, or say it has some decreased ventilation, it's going to lose its asphalt shingle granulars. So you can see on the left, in the top left corner of that picture, there's still a lot of the granulars left, but on the right, a lot of them has fallen off. It's either been repaired, or we've had some issues in this area, decreasing ventilation, or it's just a really old roof. But a lot of these can be seen from the ground, and you don't need me to point those out. A lot of issues with the roofs are coming from our penetrations. So every hole that's put in the roof surface is a possibility for water to get through. So the more holes or more penetrations that are up on the roof, the more possibilities you're going to have for leaks. So just think about that when you're looking at it from the ground.
Can you explain to everybody as well too, Danny, on like number 4 and 5? We get this, we write this up in our reports all the time about rain collars, and what's the significance of a rain collar typically, and where do we see these?
You mean around the flashing?
Yeah, around the penetrations. And what type of sets? We usually see these around concrete tile roofs.
Yeah, so we're really trying to pay attention to the flashings, make sure that they're tucked into the underlayment correctly. If they require mastic, it's got to have a good layer of mastic. Mastic only lasts a few years on the roof until it starts cracking. You're not going to be able to see a lot of that from the ground, but severely deteriorated mastic around the flashings, you can usually tell. If it's 5-10 years old, you're going to have a lot of cracking. You're going to have a lot of leaks. The roof needs to be maintained every couple of years. Otherwise, you're going to have things cracking and drying out, letting water into the attic, causing more problems. think that's it. Onto the chimney. Yeah, we can obviously tell from the ground if we're looking up at this chimney. Not only is this a problem for letting water into the house, but it's also a safety problem for anybody walking around the house. Any one of these bricks could fall down and hit somebody on the head. This just needs to be replaced. You don't need an inspector to come out and tell you that that chimney is in need of repair. You should already be on the phone with a masonry contractor or a chimney repairman. And then more penetrations, more buildup roofs, or more holes in roofs. Skylights are one of the biggest issues or biggest problems for roof leaks, because they're a big penetration. They're beautiful when we look at them from the ground or from the inside up, but there's a lot of areas around a skylight that can let water in and cause a lot of damage. So every one of those skylights needs to be looked at. It's hard to tell from the ground if they're going to need issues, but you can expect if they have a lot of penetrations like this, that there's probably going to be some issues or some maintenance that required. So, on to windows, Brian.
Yeah, so we're talking about the dual pane windows right here, and Danny's got a picture of this section here. So dual pane windows and the effectiveness, we're going to kind of go over some things. One of the things that we see a lot with the dual pane windows is the seals are lost. We all know what that looks like for the most part, but I've got some good photographs in here as well. So you can see where we've pointed out to the one on the right, the middle there, you can kind of see where it's fogging up. It's a standard, window, dual pane window. But here's one that's distressed a little bit more and so it'd be easier to see. So the one on the left here, we've completely lost the seal, and people have asked us, how does that happen? So what goes on is that the dual pane, the argon gas that's in between the two panes of glass escapes because there's a leak in the window that wasn't sealed properly, or it's usually in our case in Arizona, it's just the constant heat beating on that window and deteriorating the seals, and then it loses, and then that's what it looks like. I've often used the term, it looks like it's raining in between the panes of glass because the seal is gone. Now it used to be kind of an issue in the we're licensed by the Bureau of Technical Registration, and since the onslaught of people complaining about, well, the inspector didn't write this up or didn't, they've now deemed this as not a deficiency, but more of a aesthetic thing, because it still has two pieces of glass. It's ugly. Obviously, it's ugly. And the R factor, or the insulation property, it's always been kind of minimal. It's not great. It's maybe like an R3 to R6, but it's still an insulation property. And I still write it up. I'll still put it in my report. There is some companies that can fix them, but for the most part, it's hard. They're hard to find. They were around the state here, especially in Phoenix and Scottsdale, but they've since kind of gotten away from it. I don't know why, but I think we're going to keep having these issues with these windows. Dan and I have talked about this before too. It's mostly with the vinyl type windows. You'll see some of the metal or aluminum type that have seals that are lost, but the vinyl type windows, they don't do all that well in the heat. You know, they move, they flex, and I've been told that it's soon going to be another 5 years and they're going to switch material again. They're thinking more of an extruded material. But you can see this one on the left, you know, we get them in the windows, we get them indoors. And even in the cold weather, we get them, we have inspectors all over the United States, and they still report on this, like in Minnesota, you know, where it's freezing up there, and the extreme temperatures that'll cause the seals to lose as well. But again, it kind of reiterates back what I said. How do we replace, and companies can replace them. You know, the long term or the repair is replacing, but windows are not cheap. I'll tell you, I've looked in and have talked about window replacement with some people. I had one gentleman, he was looking at a $50,000 bill to replace all the windows in the house. It's not cheap. They're not cheap. So be careful of what you try to replace them with as well too. So plumbing. Let's talk a little bit about plumbing here. Common types of plumbing that we're seeing: copper, galvanized, PEX, CPVC. The other one is polybutylene as well too. Copper and PEX are still kind of our go-to, if you will. More PEX now as well too. PEX is the newer type of material. We've been using it about 20 years. It's I say it's not newer material, but it's been 20 years now, 23 years. It's a good material. They've actually froze that pipe 3 times its size, and it still doesn't burst. It's a good material. I'll tell you a quick story. My next door neighbor has a cabin up in Munns Park, and he kept blowing the pipes out, and he's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do anymore. I said, well, replumb the little cabin and get rid of the copper and put PEX in there. So he did, and he hasn't had an issue for about 5 years now since we talked him into, replumbing with PEX. So, and it's cheaper. It's actually cheaper than copper, and it's easier to make up. So it's a good material.
If I can add one thing about PEX there, Brian, it comes in big spools, so there's a lot less joints. There's a lot less cutting.
There's a lot less joints. It's easier to make up. You can make the 90s in there. You're not sweating pipe up in the attic. Especially in remodels. When I was in construction, the poor guy was up in the attic making pipe up in a 165-degree attic and trying not to catch the attic on fire with his torch. But now it's just a compression fitting. It's just 2 compression fittings put together and sealed. And that's good. So, well, we do have some examples of some galvanized. See the stuff on the left-hand side. This is something we like to discuss with some of the older houses. This is relatively 1950, 1954, 55. You'll see this. And the galvanized plumbing, it's kind of like your arteries. It doesn't wear from the out to in. It actually corrodes from inside out. And the concern is because you can't see the inside of the interior of the pipe unless you actually cut like we did on the left here. You don't know you have issues. But one of the issues that we do see is the low volume of water that flows through the house as well too. That's a good indication if you had galvanized plumbing that, it's just like your arteries. Your blood's not going through, but same thing with the galvanized plumbing. Water's not flowing, and it's impeding, and it's making a mess. But the good thing, like I said, with the onslaught of PEX being introduced, plumbing is 1/3 of the cost of what it used to be, in half the time. So we can replumb a house, a relatively bigger house, 2,000, 2,500 square foot, which is your relative size here in Arizona. You can replumb the entire house in a couple of days. Whereas, in the old days, we're running sticks of copper, or using flex copper and sweat and pipe in the attic. It takes a while. So, but here are the 2 different, the difference of the CPVC, PVC, PEX, galvanized, and the rigid plumbing, and then the flex copper is what you're seeing as well too. I wish we had a picture of the polybutylene.
So if anybody wants to look at my camera, I've got polybutylene at my house here.
There you go.
If anybody can see my screen, that's what poly looks like.
Dan, show them what this, it probably can't see it, but the polybutylene actually has this on the side is either Vanguard or the imprint of PB 2110 is usually an indicator as well too. But you can see the color of that pipe. It's that gray pipe. It's the gray. And the fittings, the bands. That's what Dan's got in his right under his finger. That's the issues that, that's how we made those up. And that's how there are a lot of issues with those, because the tool that crimps those bands have to be calibrated properly, and they weren't calibrated properly. And because they weren't putting enough pressure on there and making that tight seal. So If you lined up 5 houses in the neighborhood and you talk to all those people that have been there forever, yeah, we had no issues. Yeah, we had no issues. In the next house, yeah, we've had leaks. We've had plumbing leaks. I've had my insurance company replace the plumbing. But there was a national recall and there was an issue with it. So
this piece just
here
happened
again,
to be
a little
underneath
close up
mold
of just what PEX
manufacturer.
looks like compared to the other material. Red, it's kind of cool because it's for us dummy inspectors. White or clear supply pipe, red hot water, blue cold water. So I actually found a toilet a couple of months ago that was plumbed with red water. The toilet was hot. They were plumbing hot water to the toilet. Kind of nice on your bum, but probably not the greatest thing for your plumbing. But yeah, they had to actually correct that as well too. So, but that's everything's color coded for us. That's the reason. So, Danny, if you want to pick this up, I know you like to talk about water heaters and.
Yeah, probably every other water heater I go to, I find damage around it. It's pretty easy to spot the water damage. Older water heaters tend to leak. We've got some. Well, this is still asbestos here. They've got some asbestos slides after this, Brian. I think we're still on asbestos. Yeah, so asbestos roofs. Brian, do you want to pick up on that? I don't have much experience with the asbestos roofs. I know what we're looking at. We're looking at asbestos flues up in the attic on the left-hand side. That's an old water heater.
Yeah.
Going up through the attic.
Yeah. The white, so that white tape that you see is that fabric tape is possible asbestos material like too.
And they ran a flexible vent material through that. That looks code. Then on the right side, we're looking at 9-inch by 9-inch square tiles. If you ever run into an old checker panel floor that has 9-inch by 9-inch tiles, you're looking at asbestos probably. Asbestos is something to be a little bit concerned about if you're going to be doing some remodeling, because you're probably going to want to get it taken out by some professionals just to be safe. But for the most part, if you're not breaking it, cutting it, making it breathable, it's not really going to hurt you. So we don't try to create too much of an issue over asbestos, but we do bring it to the client's attention.
There's that tape on the left-hand side that Danny was talking about as well too. So it's that fabric tape, and this is again, this is a possible asbestos-like material that's inside there as well too. I've got the different types of insulation. This is the vermiculite type of insulation. Again, older home, you could actually tell. I mean, it's got knob and tube wiring on the right-hand side, but the vermiculite. Does anybody know what the vermiculite is actually? It's actually asbestos that's heated up and then it pops and then it becomes an insulation property material. So I've been an inspector for almost over 20 years, and I've only had one house that I actually crawled up in the attic and it had the vermiculite in the attic. And I was wearing a respirator, but still I took my pictures and got out. Because it's not safe. It's not safe. So again, the house has to be pretty old to see the vermiculite. The other one is, I get this all the time, is the popcorn ceilings and the drywall. Typically anything we say 1978, 1979 is kind of like cutoff. I know you guys do the same thing in your paperwork. You have your client sign a possible asbestos disclaimer, lead-based paint disclaimer. We also always discuss this as well too. You can have it tested. You can scrape a little bit off, put it in an envelope. I used to use a lab down at ASU and send it down there. I think it was like $40. But I actually have an environmental guy now too that will actually come to the house because, I think it's just a little bit safer, and you're going to get an accurate and more detailed report from the environment company that we use, and he's usually very quick. For engineers, and engineers are they're real proud of themselves, but he's very good, and he'll give you information pretty quick. So it's a good thing. I mean, so if you have a house that's, built prior to 1978, 1979, we've got quite a bit of popcorn ceilings that, yep, these are the first things that are coming down, Brian. I always make sure you have it tested first. So even with new construction, we have to take in consideration of sometimes even new houses built in old neighborhoods can have issues as well too. We've had this, everybody knows about the Arcadia district, and there's some older infrastructure that's over there, and we're putting in the houses over there in Arcadia are absolutely gorgeous, but you got to remember too, that's old infrastructure that are still over there. So you need to take that in consideration as well too. Okay. Just because you're buying a brand new home, brand new construction, taking consideration of where it's being built and the type of infrastructure that's going on top of it. Here's my favorite part, my electrical. I mean, I was an electrician for years, so this is kind of I love talking about electrical. I've bored myself sometimes. So, but a couple of things we just want to make sure you kind of take away from electrical here. You can take the Zinsco panel and the Federal Pacific panels. And I've got pictures of those for you here. So the little one on the left, can everybody see that's where it says Stab Lock? And then on the one on the right, obviously says Federal Pacific, but the Stab Lock load control, that's the Federal Pacific. Here's the thing, they actually went under UL rating testing. They ran out of money during the testing of the UL testing of the Federal Pacifics, and it was inconclusive. They really have never determined whether or not the Federal Pacific panel was actually deemed dangerous. But there has been enough incidents where electricians have written it up or have had incidents where the circuit never tripped properly. And that's the issue it had, is that the breakers that are on the load controller don't trip when they're overloaded or is ground faulted. So it's always good if you have a Federal Pacific and you're walking around with the client and you see that Stab Lock sign, that in the back of your mind, well, inspector's he's gonna write this up. He's gonna tell you, hey, he's got a Federal Pacific panel. And it'd probably be a good idea if you have an electrician kind of in the wings. Sometimes I've had agents go, hey, we saw the Federal Pacific when we were walking around the house. We're going to have an electrician over there, Brian, when you're doing the inspection, just to kind of go through it. I'm like, oh, great. I love to have the second opinion. And especially for the professional, that's what he does all day long, is looking at these panels and can assess what's going on. So the second one is the Zinsco panel, and you can actually see it on the top there. It's actually pretty elaborate. It's very colorful, red, yellow, gray. These panels kind of stick out as well too. Same kind of issue. Some older panels that just didn't trip properly, or not as functional as the newer stuff as well too. And again, it's just recommend that we have an electrician evaluate that panel. I wish I don't have a picture of that new QO panel. That was the third panel that we were talking about. But it's in newer construction from 2021, or excuse me, 2020 to 2022. So it's been in the last 2 years. But it's a QO squared E panel. And just because the house is brand new doesn't mean it can be issues. There cannot be issues with the electrical service panel as well too. But again, we're also taking consideration as Danny and I do an inspection on a house. We see this a lot where they've taken, I had one last week, they took the gas meter out of the house. So they switched the entire home to electric, but they've kept the old 100 amp service on the house. Well, now you've just added the washing machine or the dryer load, water heater load, and the stove load onto a 100 amp service. And that doesn't even count that you've got, an air conditioner on the roof as well too, that's drawing 40 amps as well. So when we see something like that, we definitely would like to make sure that we're not overloading the panel, and that if we're going to do a remodel and we're going to rip the gas out of the house and go straight electric, that we should evaluate the system and make sure that it's going to be able to handle the new loads. Aluminum wiring. This is another big thing that's going on. I still get a lot of questions. People just get really upset when I start talking about aluminum wiring. But it's been my contention as being an electrician as well too. It's as good as the electrician that made it up. So not mixing aluminum with copper. That's the big thing. We see that on all the remodels when it's not properly terminated. Aluminum will loosen up as well too. So if you do not have a what we call flux on or anti-accident paste on the aluminum, you'll get that as well too on the service panel. But don't worry if you have aluminum wiring. Don't worry that the house is going to be possibly be an issue. It can be because somebody been remodeling and not knowing what they're doing. So again, it's another thing that we always make sure that we put in our reports to have it evaluated as well. Foundations. Does Danny, you want to talk a little bit about the cracks and foundations? And
Sure. Yeah. Everything is settling. Everything wants to settle. I just found a crack underneath the tiles in my living room last night. You can't even see the grout in it, but you can tell that the foundation has got a little bit of a crack in it. I'm not too concerned about it, but some cracks are a little bit more concerning than others. A big crack in the foundation can let water in, and the water that gets in the crack not only can promote further settlement of the foundation, but water can get into the crack and expand that crack even further, promoting further deterioration. So things that we'll see in a house that has some foundation issues, we're going to see that big crack. We're going to look at the doors and windows that are not closing and opening properly. You lift the window up or you slide it to the left and the right, and there's still gaps in it. Floors that gallop, floors that have bumps and weaves in them, and then areas of the house that might lean more than other areas. Sometimes you can stand a distance away from a house and just take a look at it, and you'll be able to see that a house has got a lean to it, or it's shifting a little bit. Diagonal cracks at the corners of the windows and doors, especially bigger ones, are really a good indication of foundation settlement and structural movement. Small cracks are typical stucco drying. So when you have two planes of stucco drying away from a window, it's going to pull in different directions. So you're going to get a little bit of a crack. But when you get some major movement, you're going to see major cracks shooting off from that 90-degree corner of the window. And then, as you can see in the picture on this one, both the left and the right, same window. It's got cracks on both sides of the window. It extends all the way from the corner of the window down to the trim. You want to go to the next slide there, Brian. So if it was just a 2 or 3 inch crack down from the window, it wouldn't be as concerning, but because this crack goes all the way from the window down to the floor, it's showing some significant movement in the structure. So I would be a little bit concerned about this. On the next slide, please. We're looking at a basement. We're looking at really wet areas. We're looking at water behind paint. You can see the bubbling. You can almost tell that there's moisture behind that paint. And that's what it is. The moisture is going to deteriorate the structure behind it. The foundation is going to need some repairs. You can't just cover up water. You have to eliminate the water getting into the structure. So if you see some bubbling up like this behind paint, you can expect some repairs that are going to be coming after it. Then we're looking at the cracks on the outside, on the pavement and on the foundation wall. We're looking at big significant cracks with displacement is what's concerning to us. Small cracks that can be filled and sealed, like the width of a quarter, not concerning. But when you start to see, like in the middle picture, you see pulling away, you see a V crack. It gets small at the bottom and gets bigger at the top. That means there's some pull there. The building is actually pulling apart left and right, and the foundation is cracking. We're going to need to call somebody in if you see something like that. A pavement crack on the right, if there's no displacement, you might be able to seal it in and get away with just a patch job. But with the yellow tape there, that's a good indication that there's been some displacement. That's telling people that, hey, there's a trip hazard here. So there's going to be some settlement. That's going to take some issues or some grinding down of the pavement or lifting up that slab to make it level again and then resealing it. Back to new construction, Brian. Most of the time, everything you see on a new house is done very well. There's always a couple things that don't get completely done. There's always a couple things either on the roof. I noticed Brian saw this just a little while ago, went in the attic on a brand new build and there's no insulation. How does a guy buy a house with no insulation? It's not that hard to see it. You just have to poke your head up in there and take a look. It happens. 90% of the time, everything your client looks is going to be amazing. They're going to fall in love with a brand new house. You've got new finishes, you've got new floors, new windows, everything is looking brand new. They're going to be excited about it, but there's still going to be some issues. You still got to worry about a sewer lateral. Did the builders dump a whole bunch of paint or building materials down in the drains during the build? And now 3 months after you move into the house, you're going to have a backed up plumbing system. There's things that you're going to be able to see, things that you're not going to be able to see, but for the most part on a new build, it's going to look beautiful, it's going to look nice, but it's still important to still get it inspected because there's some installation practices that don't get done properly. The house dreams are made of. We've all seen the flipper house. We've all seen the great, beautiful house on the inside with the brand new white kitchen and the brand new tile floors with the gray tile floors. But then you look up at the roof, and when we climb up on the roof, we can always see some issues. Typical flippers like to put their money into what everybody sees in the kitchen and the living room. I'll hop up on the roof and I'll find a whole bunch of mastic or tar over the top of nail heads, or on the right picture you can see some structural framing sticking through the roof. There might be an issue of a closed valley there might be some water damage in that valley. So those are issues you can spot from the ground, but for the most part, new construction, you still need to get it inspected. There's still issues that come up.
Where are we, Dan?
Conclusions for new construction is where I'm at. Drainage is a big one for a brand new build because they're building a house. They're not looking at your landscape. They're not looking at how water gets away. They're going to do what they can to make a minimal effort to make sure water doesn't pool up around the foundation, but you've really got to get some rock down, some landscape, and some proper swales and grading. Most of our houses in Phoenix, they drain towards the street. So if you've got no drainage towards the street, if they've installed trees or fences or gates in between the house and the fence, and the water from the backyard has no way to get to the street, you're going to have some drainage issues. So on to mold. Brian, you want to pick up on some mold? You probably saw that quite a bit.
Yeah, as to say, we have people have asked. I just got a call from a client. He was worried because the window in the bathroom wasn't working, and that was the only means of ventilation. And he says, I'm just worried about mold building up inside that room. He's going to have a roommate, and who knows if he's going to open the window. And so we discussed it. I said, you're going to get mildewy. You get that buildup mildew that's in the ceiling. With the hot showers during that time as well. But it's always good to make sure we ventilate properly. Black mold, to remember, mold needs two things: constant moisture and constant heat. So if we do find it, we're going to report it, and we're going to make sure that, we can get you a proper referral for abating this stuff as well too. So I'm going to show you some pictures of where we had come across it. Some of it's pretty obvious. You can see some of the in the kitchen here as well too. And then the one on the right there, this is because the window's been leaking for so long. In Arizona, we don't get as much rain as everybody else too, but we have seen this in the past where sprinklers were constantly hitting the house, and because the window was leaking, that's what happened. So there it had two elements. It had constant moisture and constant heat. Excuse me. So that instance where you're writing up the sprinklers hitting house because it's conditions conducive to termites, but we can also get the black stuff. What can be done about it? Black mold, we can have it encapsulated, have it remediated properly. But here's a couple of what we call the cheap remediation. You just have some guy in there painting kills all over the place and calling it good, but sometimes that's not the case. It's got to be removed properly and dried out. Dan, I know you want to talk about water heaters here real quick.
Yeah, I love water heaters. Yeah, so looking at water heaters, we've got tons of damage. We're looking at 3 natural gas water heaters. We can tell that it's gas by looking up at the top. You see a flue coming out of it, or you see that yellow flexible vent, or it's telling you that it's a gas appliance. So it's very easy to see. We're looking for mold, the water damage around the outside of the water heaters. You can definitely tell on the left one that we've had some built up water issues over time. As they get older, they leak, they rust from the inside out, just like the galvanized lines. And you won't see it right away, but eventually you'll start seeing rust on the outside of the tank. Anything over about 10, 15 years. It was crazy. I saw a water heater the other day that was 9 years old and it was rusting out at the bottom. They're glass lined on the inside of the water tank. And if that glass lining starts deteriorating, your metal is exposed to water immediately and it just starts rusting, and you'll get that water rusting. In the middle, it's pretty easy. We can see a TPR valve that's missing. It goes down to about a foot and then it stops. That really needs to be terminated on the outside. And then on the right, we're looking at a water heater line that's got a flexible line on the TPR line. Now, when these TPR valves open on a water heater, they can have really high temperature and really high pressure. So if we've got a flexible line on that TPR valve, you can just imagine it's like turning on a sprinkler hose without a connection on the end of it. It's just going to wave like a dog tail. On to the next slide, we're looking at more variations of newer water heaters that are clean installs. We can see that the one on the left is a gas water heater. You've got the appliance connector on the left, the yellow gas line going into a little drip leg before it goes into the thermostat controller. Up on the top of that left picture, you're also looking at an expansion tank, which is typically put in on a newer house that maybe has a check valve or maybe has a pressure reducing valve. If you've got really high pressure, they might reduce the pressure inside of the house, and then they want to put in that expansion tank. So the water that's inside your pipes has somewhere to go when it heats up and cools down.
It's also thermal. It's thermal expansion is the technical terms, but you'll see it sometimes on 2-story houses as well too, because what that does is that thermal expansion tank actually keeps the line pressurized as well.
Right. Yeah. So you don't lose that pressure up on the second floor for sure. Always looking for a drip pan. Everybody knows how important those are and how much they get called out during home inspections. If you don't see it, we recommend it. It's a cheap fix, cheap upgrade. But then on the right, you can see the electric water heater. Pretty easy to tell that this is a newer model because it's got the LCD screen. We didn't see water heaters built like this in the 90s. So even the early 2000s, we started to see them a little bit like this, but it's a good indication that it's newer. But on the next slide, you can see some of typical water heater ID tags and how to read them. You'll see the model number, serial numbers. Sometimes they'll be broke down into the year and the week. Builder-centered org, I think that's what it's called, Brian.
Yeah.
Builder-centered org. It's a good website to have saved on your phone.
Yeah, you can Google it too, but The one that's always tough is the Bradford White, because you need the date code. They use alpha instead of just numeric, so you got to bring your decoder ring out.
Yeah, most of the
But
time
this
you can
is good
tell.
for all of you guys to show. You can actually see the serial number. You know, always look at the serial number. The first two numbers in the serial number are always the date of the water heater.
Yeah, very easy to tell the age of a water heater just by looking at the tag. Like you said, Brian, there's a couple brands out there that are, you're gonna have to look them up or just tell by the way it looks. One thing I did want to go over today is I've noticed quite a few listings that I've driven up to that were listed as electric, and they actually had gas in the property, and the buyers had no idea. It's kind of amazing to me that a house gets listed as being an electric house when there's gas available, because there's many benefits to gas, and a lot of people are looking at gas upgrades in the future. So what can you do as a buyer's agent to drive up and immediately know that there is gas on a property? A couple things to look for: obviously the gas meter in the middle. You've got a gas stub in the backyard on the right where you can hook up to a gas stove or a gas grill, or even in the laundry room on the picture on the left where you've got that gas appliance connector for the dryer. On the next slide, we're even going to go a little bit farther. And if you're in the driveway and you're looking at the house and you see that B vent in the middle picture, that's the vent on the right-hand side. If you see that, that's an appliance venting flue. That's a B vent cap. So that means you've got a natural gas appliance inside the house. Or if you just look at the water heater and you see that flue going up. Solve a lot of answers really quickly, just walking around the property and taking a look at it, especially with termites. If anybody has ever seen a termite tube, you know exactly what we're looking at. This can either mean that the termites were there for a couple days, or they went in and they stayed for months on end. We're not going to know until we get inside the house. What are some signs of termite evidence on the inside of the house? Well, sometimes we'll have holes on the ceiling. We'll have little indicators that the termites used to be there, but they've been brushed away and cleaned up. So now we have a bunch of little holes in the ceiling. On the next slide, you can kind of see some of those holes that are poking out. You see some of this damage on the ceiling, you've probably had termites up in the attic. It's got a nice paint job on it, but it's always an issue, always something I'm looking forward for in a house, especially houses that are 30, 40 years old with that, ventilation issue. And typically have some type of termites. So I want to finish it off there, Brian.
Yeah, so we're gonna, kind of the last thing is where do we go? I know Dan and I have actually been broadening I'm going to Florence tomorrow, but we try to stay within the Phoenix metropolitan area, Scottsdale, Tempe, Buckeye. We can travel if we need to, but you might get charged a trip charge, but we're pretty flexible. Our rates are conducive to the size of the house. Any ancillary services, we do inspections on pools. The sewer lateral now is a ancillary service that we're very proud of as well. The availability, we're here 24/7. And we have an 800 number. You can call it directly, or you can go to bpginspections.com and you can book us online. I've had agents booking inspections on a Sunday night at 2:00 in the morning, and you can do it. You can do it. It'll get flagged, but we can make it there. So, does anybody have any questions or concerns? I know we're on Facebook. Dan's been really doing a pretty aggressive Facebook, trying to educate a lot of his realtors with his Facebook page. What was that program? Rumble? I forget what you were doing.
Oh yeah. I've got a lot of videos up on YouTube now. I've got a couple hundred videos on YouTube and Rumble. Rumble is just like YouTube. It's just a video platform. So you can find a lot of the educational videos out there. I try and keep them short, so I'm not boring you. But yeah, if you get bored some afternoon and want to flip through some educational stuff,
it's good for our clients. we're going to start posting, and Dan and I are going to start hopefully working together and posting some out in the fields stuff. Hopefully we can do some educating, like pool repairs, pool safety, stuff like that as well too. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We thank Bliss for the continual support. And we want to thank everybody for helping our families as we try to help you. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank you.
it.
Does anybody have any questions or anything like that before we?
I actually had one question about windows. So it sounded like if you've got dual pane windows, more or less, like, I mean, at what point do you need to replace the windows in a house? Do they ever outlive do they have a life expectancy on them?
Yeah, I mean, first generation dual pane windows, there was very minimal argon gas in between the two panes.
And when did those come out? Like my house was built in 2006, and I think I have the crappiest windows ever. But like you said, it's going to be like 30 to 50,000 to replace.
Yeah, it's not cheap. I want to say the first round of dual pane windows were like 92, 93. I've seen them in that. I mean, we were seeing single pane windows through the 80s and really not seeing dual pane until like the early 90s. And they're okay, but you know, and it's always been my contention, 2 pieces of glass are better than one. But now with the onslaught of the low E windows that are tinted and, you know, they're glaring and they're more insulated, windows are a big deal. They really are. It's just how efficient a house is, you know, we're starting to see big changes in the environmental and how people are trying to keep their houses cool without spending $1 million. So that's a big deal. It is. Windows are a big deal.
Over in Europe, triple pane windows are actually a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had an Irish guy come over here to America. He's trying to sell triple pane windows and he's not going to do it. I mean, they're too expensive.
Yeah.
It's just way too expensive. But triple pane over there in Europe, you know, like I said, my mom and dad are from the UK and it's freezing over there. And the wind is absolutely just torrid, absolutely nasty. But, you know, you can see why triple pane would work over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right, then.
I didn't go over any
questions
today.
Or need to get a hold of us, you know, feel free to give us an email or a text, or you can hit Danny up on Facebook on his page, or you can friend me on Facebook as well too, and we'll get your questions answered.
Just no questions about fences, Lisa, and we'll be all right.
You mean when there's a basketball built under it? That's not a problem, right?
No, that's, you know, that's called a cylindrical foundation. You know, it's got a proper term.
Yes.
It's crazy. that was an experience. That was a buyer.
Have taken a picture of that.
Yeah, I know. That's crazy.
That would have been great for your presentation. This is not a good plan.
Right. Very good. Well, thank you, Lisa. Good to see you.
Thank you, guys.
Good to see you guys. Thank you so much.
Take care. Be safe, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you later. Bye.